All right, welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big ideas. Today we're going to tackle a word you've probably heard thrown around in meetings, maybe seen on job descriptions, pretty much all over the tech world. Agile. So what does it actually mean, and how did it completely change the way we build things?
Okay, so to really get agile, you've got to understand what came before it. The old way. People call it plan-driven development. Now think about building a massive skyscraper. You would absolutely demand a perfect, complete blueprint before a single brick gets laid, right? Well, for decades, that's exactly how we tried to build software.
So what's the problem with that? Well, software isn't a skyscraper. The world it lives in changes, fast. A super detailed plan you made back in January, by June, it might be totally worthless. Maybe a competitor just dropped a killer new feature, or your customers are now demanding something completely different. Those rigid, set-in-stone blueprints, they just couldn't keep up.
So something had to give, right? How did the tech world respond to this problem? That's what we're going to dig into. We'll look at the initial need for speed, the creation of the Agile Manifesto, how it actually works in the real world, where it really shines, and yeah, the very real problems it faces. And finally, we'll talk about finding the right balance. All right, let's jump in.
Okay, part one, the need for speed. At the heart of this whole thing was one fundamental shift. Speed became the new currency. Getting a working product, even an imperfect one, into users' hands now was suddenly way more valuable than delivering a perfect product a year from now. The old, slow, plan-driven ways just couldn't compete.
So you can see this all playing out in the late 1990s. A new way of thinking started bubbling up, mostly out of pure frustration. Developers were just sick and tired of these heavyweight processes, the mountains of paperwork and the endless design meetings. They needed something lighter, something faster, a way to build software that could actually survive in the real world.
And that brings us to the Agile Manifesto. Now, this wasn't some new, rigid rule book, not at all. It was more like a philosophy, a set of core values that were about to completely reshape the industry.
So what did it say? The manifesto laid out 4 really powerful shifts in thinking. It basically said, hey, individuals and interactions, we value those over rigid processes and tools. And working software, that's way more important than tons of documentation. Customer collaboration, that's better than fighting over a contract. And maybe the biggest one of all, responding to change is much, much smarter than just blindly following a plan.
And this little phrase at the bottom it's perfect. It sums up the whole philosophy. It's not saying plans and documentation are worthless. Of course not. It's saying we value the stuff on the left more. It's all about a massive shift in priorities, putting flexibility and real human collaboration right at the top of the list.
Okay, so that's the philosophy. But what does this actually look like in practice? How does a team take these big ideas and turn them into, well, actual software? Well, instead of doing each of these big steps just once for the whole project, which could take years, Agile flips the script. It works in these small, super fast, repeatable cycles. A team might do all 4 of those steps for just one tiny feature in a couple of weeks. They're delivering little pieces of a working system over and over and over again.
And these principles here, this is the secret sauce that makes those rapid cycles even possible. You can't have that quick feedback loop without deep customer involvement. You can't move fast if you don't trust your people to figure out the best way to work. And none of it, absolutely none of it works if you don't go in expecting change and build your system to handle it.
All right, so as you can probably guess, this super fast, super collaborative way of working isn't some magic bullet. It's not the right answer for every single project out there. Agile really hits its sweet spot when you're working on small or medium-sized products, especially when the team is small enough that they can all be in the same room, talking face-to-face every day. And the really critical piece, you have to have a customer who's willing to be a true partner, someone who's in the trenches with the team, giving feedback constantly.
Okay, so this brings us to the reality check, the big question.
If Agile is so great, why doesn't everybody use it for everything? Well, it turns out that the very things that are its greatest strengths in one context, the informality, the focus on new stuff, the small team vibe, become its biggest weaknesses in others.
Yeah, there are 3 huge hurdles that pop up again and again. First, legal contracts. A traditional contract wants everything defined up front, which is literally the opposite of what Agile is all about. Second, maintenance. Agile is awesome for building new things, but guess what? Most of the money in software is spent maintaining old systems for years and years. And third, scale.
That amazing face-to-face communication, it starts to break down really fast when you have huge teams spread all over the world.
And this problem has a name: scaling agile. It is one of the biggest challenges in the entire industry. How do you keep that speed and flexibility when you're talking about hundreds of developers in different time zones all working on one massive, super complex system? It's a really tough nut to crack.
Which leads us to our final and maybe most important point: finding the right balance. Because in the real world, it is almost never a black and white choice. It's not agile versus plan-driven.
Exactly. The best teams, the most successful projects, they don't pick a side in some holy war. They operate on a spectrum. They take the best of both worlds, blending the structure and foresight of planning with the speed and flexibility of Agile to fit what they're actually trying to build.
So how do you find that balance? Well, it all depends on a few key things. How big is the system? Is it small enough for one team, or is it a monster that needs huge teams? What about regulations? Are you building a fun mobile app, or are you building software for an airplane, which needs tons of documentation? The answers to those questions tell you where on that spectrum you need to be.
In thinking about it this way, it totally reframes the whole conversation. It stops us from just slapping a label on things, you know? It's not about checking a box that says, we are an agile organization.
Now, the real question is, how agile does this specific project need to be? And that is the key takeaway. Agility isn't a state of being, it's a dial you can turn up or down. The smartest teams aren't asking if they're agile, they're asking how agile they need to be to get the job done. And they adjust that dial for every single project they tackle.
And just so you know, this explainer was based on the foundational work on software engineering by the great Ian Somerville.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for another deep dive right here on The Explainer.